First question, what was opening day like as a stadium operations manager for a new ballpark? What was that experience like?
Well, it's exciting, not many people get a chance to open a stadium and be part of it. And so for me, coming from my roots at Memorial Stadium, where I spent a number of years there with the Orioles, to a brand new stadium was really exciting for me to be part of. So it was great. There were some anxious moments, but I think all said and done, everything worked out really well.
I believe you had a sellout crowd of 44,535. What was that anticipation like going into the game? You knew it was going to be packed.
Yeah, well, we knew it was going to be packed. Even at Memorial Stadium, at the end, the last few years, opening day would sell out. But in this case, because it was a brand new stadium and not everything had been tested, we did the big flush. You've probably heard about the big flush, where you bring people in and they flush toilets all at once. Well, you can do that, but you can't really simulate things like 40,000 people going to concession stands, or making sure the flow of the people through the building is what you anticipate the flow is going to be, so you don't necessarily have backups. So those types of things, we kind of looked at and reviewed, and after every game, we kind of did an after-action report of things that we saw that we might need to modify or change a little bit here and there in order for the stadium to run a little bit better. And we did it in all different areas. We started traffic, transportation, parking, concessions, cleaning. You run the gamut, ushering, ticket taking, things like that. You run the gamut, and we went through all those components to determine what worked and what maybe needed some tweaks in order to make it a little bit better for the next game.
So what is the big flush? I'm actually not aware.
You're not aware of the big flush? So the big flush is basically what happens is you bring a bunch of people in and you try to flush all the toilets at one time, so that they're working. Because when you get to an environment where you've got 40,000 people, and you really want them all to work, because if they don't work, there's a problem. So typically about a week or two before, you do a big flush. Most stadiums that open up do something similar, and you bring volunteers in, and people are more than happy to come in and see the stadium, but also experience the big flush.
Okay, and then in terms of, you mentioned parking, all these people showing up, was it more than you expected?
Not really, because I think what we tried to do is we tried to lower expectations of people and tried to get people to A, come early, B, use public transit whenever possible, and C, just lower those expectations. And light rail, that was their opening week, I believe, in Baltimore. So there was a lot going on the transportation side. And so it worked pretty well, but obviously there were some tweaks that need to be made. And now, here over 30 years later, a lot has changed with regard to the transportation and the parking. But it worked pretty darn well.
So let's talk about your individual schedule a little bit. Hour to hour, I assume you were very busy. What did that look like for you?
Well, I think that game might have started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I got there around 6 o'clock in the morning, and I like to be there early. And whatever I was working for the Orioles or the Ravens, get there early, be one of the first people there, just collect my thoughts, understand where I needed to be at certain times and what I really wanted to focus on. And in this case, it was kind of like everything. And at this point, on opening day, the die's been cast. You've really done just about everything you can do. You've made all your preparations, and hopefully everything's been done very, very well, and you've gotten all the details down. And so on opening day, it's really a situation where you're really putting fires out. You're managing, but you're really mostly putting fires out that might happen to occur. And luckily, we didn't have too many fires that I recall that day. And I think that's a testament to all the people that worked together to make it happen and make it run really smoothly.
Could you describe any of those fires that might have happened?
I can't. I wish I could remember them, but they weren't that. There didn't seem to be that many in my estimation. There were kind of small little things, but there's always small little things. Nothing goes according to plan when you bring 40,000 people together and you give them about 21 inches of seat to, as their personal space. Nothing always goes according to plan. So there are going to be glitches, but in terms of, transportation, the parking, getting people into the stadium in a timely manner, all that worked really, really well. And then the flow into the stadium worked really, really well. So those are critical aspects, because if you have a backup, just like you would have a backup on a highway, a certain area, because of an accident, things start backing up very quickly. The same thing can happen at a stadium with regard to flow, with regard to people moving about the stadium, coming into the stadium. So all that worked really, really well. And obviously we made some minor changes, but nothing drastic.
Did you get a chance to watch any of the game, sit down, have a beer? Any of that?
No.
No.
I was there early. We did our thing. Then we met after everybody left, about an hour after we left. We had probably 50 people around the table, and we went from department to department to department and just talked about items that needed to be addressed. And whether they could have been an item that we might have seen that maybe the stadium authority need to address, or maybe that someone else saw that maybe the parking company needed to address. So it was all interdisciplinary, and it really worked very well. And really what you would call now an after-action report.
So you didn't get to watch any of the game at all?
No. I don't remember who played. I don't know any of that. No.
Okay. In the Friday exhibition game before opening day, there were problems with long lines, gates not opening on time, and then fans with tickets for seats that didn't exist. Were those problems fixed by opening day?
I thought they were. Yeah, I thought they were. I don't really recall too much of that because a lot of that is a blur. But I will say I think a lot of that got resolved. And I don't recall, hearing about a lot of those kind of things at the time.
Okay. According to a Baltimore Sun article, you stayed at a hotel the night before.
Yeah.
What was going on through your mind the night before? Were you nervous for what was about to come?
Yeah, I was. I probably didn't leave the stadium until 10 or 11 that night before, and I was nervous. That's why I stayed downtown, because if something got me up in the middle of the night, I could walk right over and address it, or at least think about it or deal with it. But yeah, I was nervous, and you want everything to go right. You really want everything to go right, and so you do everything you can to try and make it right and the best of your ability, and hopefully the people that are working with you, they understand what you're trying to accomplish, and they're on the same team with you as well.
Was there that added pressure of, well, this is opening day of a major retro ballpark, that added pressure of, I need to get this right?
Not really. I just think it was, whether it was at Memorial Stadium or at Oriole Park, it's opening day. You want things to go well. You want it to be a great day for the fans when they come. And so it wasn't any added pressure, but because the stadium was new, a lot of people, whether they be ushers or ticket takers or fans, where do I go? How do I get to my seat? Where can I get this concession item? There was that anxiety among the fans too, and there was also fans just walking around in awe, because here they had been used to coming to a stadium that was built in the 50s, and here we've got this brand new stadium with wide open concourses and lots of light coming in and lots of concession stands and lots of opportunities for them to enjoy the game. So I think there was a lot of that going on as well.
Okay, how many people did you have on your team helping you? It wasn't just you, obviously.
No, I had about six staff members that worked for me that were full time, and then if you count the people that worked on game day, ushers, ticket takers, those type of folks, it's probably about 600 or so.
Okay, and then you clock in at 5:45 in the morning. What did you tell your team when you got there?
Well, they weren't there.
They weren't there.
No, they weren't there yet, but they would get there. They got there early as well. Those 5 or 6 people got there early as well, and we just kind of laid out what the game plan was for the day. We had talked about it previously, and everyone knew what their game plan was, what their area of focus was going to be, and then if they had problems, they would let me know, and we'd try to solve those problems. And so I think everyone was calm in their own way because they had their game plan. They knew what their role and responsibility was, and from there they were just able to execute that.
If you could think back, and it might be difficult, what do you think was the biggest problem that happened on that day that you had to deal with?
Well, I wouldn't call it a problem, but it was more just anxiousness. Larry Lucchino, who was the president of the team at the time, he told me and others numerous times that the Achilles heel of this whole project was going to be the transportation. And so we spent an inordinate amount of time, both from the Oriole perspective and the state perspective, to try and deal with that and mitigate that with lots of lots of public relations, publicity prior to how to get to the stadium. If you're coming from here, here's where you go, and here's where you would suggested to park, and here's this new light rail we'd like you to take, or we have MARC train coming into the station as well. So we did a lot with regard to that, and I think generally it worked really, really well. Again, there's always some glitches here and there. It may have, you could probably look back on some of the records. I bet you light rail was probably one of their biggest days ever, was that day, because we kind of pushed people to take this new light rail service. And it probably exceeded their capacity at some point because we pushed it so hard.
Yeah, I've read people showed up by rail, by helicopter.
I don't know about helicopter, but yeah, they showed up in a lot of different ways. And I think the other cool thing about it was, at Memorial Stadium, it was kind of in Midtown, and Oriole Park being downtown, people could just leave their offices and walk to the stadium. Memorial, that was really kind of non-existent. So that I think helped an awful lot. And so I think there's this vibe going around town, like, oh, I'm just going to walk from my office, or let's meet at Harbor Place and have lunch, and then we'll walk over. So that was a cool vibe. So I think that kind of thing was really neat about it.
So let's dive into that a bit more. What were the differences in transportation, ease of transportation between Memorial and Camden?
Night and day. It's like Oriole Park at Camden Yards, I think at the time had 30 bus lines running past it. We had, as I said, the new light rail. We had MARC transportation, MARC train, which is a commuter rail line connecting Baltimore and Washington. So that was a hub. Also, in addition to the city street grid, we had, a terminus of 295, of 395 right there. So in terms of that, we had loads more transportation options than Memorial Stadium. Memorial Stadium had none of that. A few bus lines, no light rail, not super busy in terms of public transit. So most of what Memorial Stadium was vehicles, personal vehicles.
Okay. Was there more or less parking at Memorial compared to Camden?
Oriole Park had more parking on site originally, and then a number of years later, then M&T Bank Stadium was built, and a big swath of that parking was used for the football stadium.
Sure. So with all the pregame ceremonies that were going on, how was your schedule affected by that? What role did you have in those?
I just kind of, our public relations department did a lot of the pregame stuff. We helped to facilitate that if they needed help in any way, getting people to and from the field, or, helping in any way that we could. Obviously, they knew we were kind of crushed with, just the fan experience, and our ushers, ticket takers, and staff really focusing on experiences of the fans. And so, we helped with it in any way we could.
Okay, and then George H.W. Bush was there at the
Yeah.
game. Did you
That added another wrinkle.
I'm going to ask about that, but did you get to meet him?
I did.
You did. What was that interaction like?
Well, it was great. I've met a couple presidents, and that was an opportunity that I won't forget. I've got a photograph of myself with him in the house here. So, and I think what it did for me was like all this work that I'd done leading up to it. It was probably 3 years worth of work, in preparation of all this. It kind of gave me a little icing on the cake. It's like, hey, you did it, you got through it, and somebody appreciated your efforts, and the president was nice enough to shake my hand and congratulate me.
Were you nervous at all? This is the president of the United States?
No, not really. Yeah, I was just trying to get through that. So, and then once that happened, then go on to, okay, all right, how are we going to get all these people home afterwards? So yeah, he came, and I think he might have stayed for maybe half the game or something, and then he, right before he leaves is when you get your handshake and your thank you, and so we got that, and right after that, it's on to, okay, let's focus on getting people out when it's time.
Yeah, you left in the fifth inning.
Yeah.
You said it added another wrinkle. How?
Well, when you have a head of state, and I've had numerous heads of states, and when I worked for the Orioles and also the Ravens, the wrinkle is all the security aspect of it. So, you've got Secret Service, and which adds a huge amount of security and a huge amount of detail to what's happening during the course of the day. So not only are you welcoming 44,000 people to this new home, but now you've got this wrinkle of, okay, I've got the President of the United States, I've got all this extra security, and what's the movement of the president during the whole course of this thing? And so, you've got to kind of deal with that, and deal with all this movement, and how you are going to work the president into that movement, and without try to disrupt fans the least you can by doing so. There's going to be disruption, but your goal is to minimize it as much as you can. And so in doing so, again, this building is new to just about everybody. I was kind of the go-to guy because I'd known the building inside and out because of what I needed to do to be prepared. And so I was right there and making all the preparations with Secret Service to get him in, get him out, and safely, and again with the least disruption possible.
Last question before I switch over. Were there any disruptions, security issues with Bush?
No.
Not at all?
Not that I recall.
You did your job.
Yeah.
Okay. Josh, you ready?
Yep.
Got it.
All right, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit to just kind of Memorial and Camden.
Okay.
Could you just start with talking about the main differences between the two stadiums?
Well, sure. Memorial Stadium was built in the 50s, and it was kind of built stadium, multi-purpose stadium, really. I mean, you know, the Orioles came to town and the Colts came to town afterwards, and Baltimore used that stadium for football and baseball for many years. It was in Midtown Baltimore, and their old Oriole Park. There was an Oriole Park that had burned down in, I think, the 40s or early 50s, and so they needed a place to play, and they played at this Memorial Stadium. And so big differences were Memorial Stadium was a much larger stadium, actually. For football, it held over 60,000 people. For baseball, a little bit fewer, like 54 or so. And didn't have all the amenities, obviously, the Oriole Park has. It didn't have club seats, didn't really have any suites. It basically had 3 levels. It had a lower level, it had a mezzanine level, which was kind of like the press level and some small little boxes, and it also had an upper level. So really there wasn't much to it. And it was built about the same time as a place called County Stadium in Milwaukee, very similar construction to the two of those, that the Brewers used to play in, and the Packers would play a few games there a year in Milwaukee as well. So they're kind of around the same timeline. It was very few amenities. It was, you had 3,000 parking spaces, and it was really in a neighborhood, in Waverly neighborhood of Baltimore. So huge differences. Oriole Park is downtown in the Central Business District. Beautiful stadium. It was built over 30 years ago, and had the amenities that Memorial Stadium did not. Had suites, had club seats, had a service level at Memorial Stadium. We didn't have a service level, which meant a level that is kind of closed to the public, that you have your locker rooms, you have your clubhouses, you have all the facilities that you need, to service the fans, like a big warehouse for concessions and things like that. We really didn't have much of that at Memorial Stadium. So when we built Oriole Park, we made sure we did lots of those things and provided for those types of back-of-the-house type functions.
Gotcha. So when there was no service level at Memorial, what did that kind of look like? Was it just...
It was half of it. Memorial was kind of built on a little bit of a hill. And so the one side of it, the east side of the stadium, had no service. There was nothing underneath. There was no basement. And then on the west side of the stadium was a little bit of a basement, and that's where the Oriole clubhouse was, the Colts locker room. They were one and the same. And then a little bit of a warehouse for the concessionaire, and kind of like a boiler room. And that was about it, And so it made it really, really challenging. For instance, people come to the ballpark, they want to drink beer, or they want to, eat food or whatever. And the concession stands were very small. And so in order, we would fill them up with food, and as much food as we could, but on a day like opening day or a big series, you were constantly seeing people walking down the concourse with additional supplies, food supplies or beer, and to resupply the stands. And at Oriole Park, we kind of took care of a lot of those aspects. Oriole Park, when we first opened it, had a system where we had these large refrigeration units throughout the stadium that would hold beer, like kegs of beer. And some of them were actually in the basement, and they would pump the beer up to the concession stands. And so those are kind of the newer things that were brought into Oriole Park that we didn't have at Memorial Stadium, where at Memorial Stadium you'd see people running kegs of beer down the concourse. We didn't have to do that at Oriole Park, which was kind of nice.
Yeah, gotcha. So in those last years at Memorial,
yeah.
Just what were kind of the biggest challenges when you were trying to do your job?
Well, one of the big challenges with Memorial, anytime we had more than 30,000 people, it became challenging on the parking lots, and also, get people parked. We had to, actually use a auxiliary space called Lake Montebello to park cars around this lake, about a half mile from the stadium, in order to accommodate all the fans that were coming. And so we would also block in cars, so that, you know, when you parked there, you were blocked in on either side. You had to wait till everybody left until you were able to get out. So if you had more than 30,000 fans, that was the reality. So that was challenging. The concourses were very narrow. I want to say maybe 28 feet wide, 20 feet wide, something like that. And, you know, here at Oriole Park, you know, we're 52-foot wide concourse, which is really great. A lot of room for people to walk around. But at Memorial Stadium, certain areas you were kind of elbow to elbow with people walking through the concourse. So those are the types of things that were difference between Memorial Stadium and Oriole Park.
Gotcha, yeah. And was there any like troubles with the bathrooms at Memorial Stadium?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. Well, you know, again, construction in the 50s as opposed to the 90s, you know, there's a ratio that you kind of look at in terms of restroom facilities for male and female. And there was no way we hit that ratio at Memorial Stadium. In the, I want to say it was the mid 70s, the city actually owned Memorial Stadium, and they actually added some restrooms on the exterior of the stadium that faced into the concourse, and most of those were female restrooms because back then, when they built the stadium, women didn't really come to games too much. So they had to address that problem. They did as best they could back then, but at Royal Park, you know, the architects have this formula, and it's this ratio of male to female people, and you do it by level, and you kind of plan for the number of restrooms and water closets by those levels.
Gotcha, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, the term that we keep hearing is that Camden is an old-fashioned ballpark, but it has modern amenities.
Yeah.
You've kind of touched on this, but just do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think the aesthetics of Oriole Park are what, you know, is really what makes it special. And so, you know, when the designers and architects, you know, the Orioles, we had a designer, Janet Marie Smith, and the architect was HOK out of Kansas City. And they all got together and decided, okay, we're going to create this ballpark, and I think a big driving force of it was, you know, a retrofit kind of park. Or not retrofit, but retro kind of field park, an old-fashioned park that had that old-fashioned feeling to it, but had modern amenities. And so I know there was some debate with regard to those two groups and also the state as to, you know, what it's going to look like. And I think what they eventually ended up with is perfect, because it really kind of fits in with the city and the cityscape. If you look across the street of Oriole Park right now, there's a neighborhood over there. And, you know, the stadium, the brick of the stadium just about matches the brick of that neighborhood. Oriole Park, you know, is set into the ground, about 20 feet into the ground. So it's not this big edifice that is, you know, really this huge thing that comes out of the ground as a stadium, which most stadiums have that feel to it. Oriole Park doesn't have that feel. Memorial Stadium felt like you were almost, it was kind of enclosed, kind of like a prison. You couldn't really see from inside the concourse into the seating bowl, or inside the concourse outside to the stadium. Oriole Park has that transparency. So if you drive down Russell Street, you can see in. People that are inside can see out. It has that transparency. And that transparency also adds a little bit of airiness to it as well. And so I think the designers did a great job of incorporating what their mindset was into the concept, and created this great aesthetic that, you know, Janet, that we kind of followed along with. And a great example of that was the uniforms that the ushers and ticket takers wore. It followed that aesthetic of kind of, you know, turn of the century kind of thing. You know, the guys wore, the ushers wore these striped shirts, gray striped shirts with a little orange bow tie, a Gatsby type hat, and a really nice sweater with the Baltimore Baseball Club logo on the crest on the chest. So it was really everything tied together, and we all worked together to develop this aesthetic that went throughout the ballpark. And the aesthetic went to things like the ads on the walls, you know, and the the signage. If you look at the signage at Oriole Park, it's got it's all Camden green, which was the color that we developed, Camden green, and it has that little pinstripe around the edges. All that is meant to be tied together into one cohesive look.
Gotcha. So like Camden Green, is that like officially like?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a Pantone. I don't know if it's a Pantone color, but that was we used to call it Camden Green, and it's that dark kind of greenish color, and they're still using it today, which is great.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you remember your first time walking into Camden Yards?
Well, before it was built, you mean, or?
Let's say like a little bit before opening day when you were preparing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember when we first broke ground. I remember, obviously, in those months leading up to it. You know, I was down there probably a year ahead of time, you know, working half out of my office at Memorial Stadium and half out of a trailer on the site, you know, for about a year ahead of time. So, you know, it was really cool to see it come up. It was really cool to then understand how everything was going to work, and obviously working very closely with the architects on the flow and, you know, how everything kind of, you know, worked together. So yeah, it was really great. And then to see it, you know, when you see a construction site, and then all of a sudden in the last couple months, things start to, you know, clean up, and signage starts going up, and you know, you feel like a sense of closure almost, like, oh wow, this place is really, it's not a dust bowl anymore. It's not just this big piece of concrete with some steel. It's really coming to life, and it was really cool to see.
What were your thoughts on the warehouse? Because we've talked to some people where there was a lot of debate about whether or not
Yeah.
to keep it.
I understand that was a big debate. I wasn't part of that debate. I think that was between the state and the Orioles, but I wasn't part of that debate. But in terms of the warehouse building, I remember when I was a kid, my mom would take my sister and I downtown to buy shoes for school. And on our way home, we drove right past the warehouse on Utah Street. I vividly remember that when I was a kid. And there wasn't much going on there at the time. But the street level was much lower than it is today. We filled all that in. So all those open, or those glass openings, those were like loading dock bays. And so the street was much lower when we drove past there. And to see it, and then I walked into it probably a year and a half before we opened Oriole Park, as they determined that, okay, we're going to use the warehouse for the offices. And so being able to walk into it and see it, it was really amazing. And then what it was then, and then what it became when we moved into the offices, because that was a big part of what I was doing too, is making sure, moving all of the office move from Memorial Stadium to Oriole Park, that was on me as well. And so we did that in, I want to say, early March, moved everybody in. So it was really cool to see the transformation of this old warehouse. I mean, there wasn't much to it. You know, it was a bunch of wood floors and dust, and this warehouse had become like a living, breathing building, office building. And so now there's lots of tenants in that office building, and it's really cool how it's been redeveloped.
Yeah, definitely. And were you consulted at all
Yes.
In what ways did you contribute to the design?
Well, in a lot of different ways. Janet and I would talk an awful lot about lots of different things. Obviously, she was the lead designer, but I would give her my input on operational things, or God forbid, every so often, maybe once, I gave her a really good aesthetic, my aesthetic point of view she might have used because she was so good at that. She was really good at that, and yeah, she. So I would. I'd be in the meetings with her and architects and talking about, this or that, and she would, they would, both the architects or Janet would say, "Hey, Roy, do you think that'll work? Do you think what we're doing here will work?" And I said, "Well, yeah, based on it, yeah, I think it will work." So yeah, I was big part of that process. As I said, I spent a lot of time down on the work site in the year or so prior to, as did Janet and other members of the Orioles staff, but mainly it was people like Janet and myself that were down there most of the time.
Gotcha. Was there ever a time where they said, "Does this look good?" and you thought maybe?
Well, yeah, there are a few times, yeah, where we needed to tweak some things here or there. I mean, there's an example where I went to the White Sox Stadium. It was called New Comiskey Park. They opened up a year prior to Oriole Park, and same architectural firm, HOK, but a much different design. They were on the south side of Chicago, and not nearly as nice aesthetically pleasing of a stadium as Oriole Park. But I went there and looked at it and did some things and looked at a lot of different things. And a small little thing. These are small little details, but they really mattered. So, for instance, in the umpire's room, so the umpire's dressing room over there in Chicago, they had, I think, 4 umpires usually for a game. You make it to a playoff game in a 6. I think they had 1 shower head. So I come back, I call up the architects, like, "Hey, what's your program?" I'm looking at our plans. What's our program for shower heads? I see we have 1. And I was out there, they have 1. They said that's not, that's nearly not enough. So what happens is these architectural firms, they have kind of a program that kind of says, "Oh, in this space you need this." But when I came back, I said, "Janet, we need to do this." So we made adjustments. So those are the type of things that we did. And again, it's a small little thing, but it stands out in my mind because think about it. If you're an umpire and it's 90 degrees out there and you've been out in the sun for 3 hours and you've got to wait for 3 other guys to take a shower before you can take a shower, he's not going to be too happy. So we made those adjustments in spite of the HOK program, and it kind of worked out. But there were thousands of those little kind of tweaks that we did, and I'm sure Janet could tell you stories of thousands of those things. But that's the one thing that kind of stands out in my mind.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So how did the security kind of change? Because I know Mark talked to you about it earlier, but the whole keg thing, you used to be able to bring kegs to Memorial. Just kind of how did that shift?
Yeah, that's changed a lot over the years. When I first started working at the Orioles, I went to work for him in 1980, and there was a guy named Wild Bill Hagee, and he was a taxi cab driver in Baltimore. He had a group of people that were in Section 34, which is first base side, just past first base in the upper level, and they liked to party. And we, at the time, you could bring a small keg of beer into the stadium, and drink it. So you could bring your own alcohol in. So fast forward to where we are today, and things have changed dramatically, right? And so when we opened Oriole Park up, you couldn't bring your own alcohol, and we actually, the Orioles stopped that sometime in the mid to late 80s, because of alcohol management concerns more than anything, and drinking and driving and things like that, which was a good thing. But you think about all the security things that have changed over the years, even since Oriole Park has opened. Oriole Park opened in 1992. At that time, you could bring a backpack in. You didn't need to go through metal detectors or magnetometers. You didn't have barcodes on tickets. You went through an actual turnstile. So things have changed an awful lot in terms of security aspect. We didn't have I think we might have had 6 cameras. There's probably hundreds of cameras at Oriole Park now. So security concerns have really, security's really changed, and concerns about security and about stadiums being soft targets for bad guys. And so it's changed the whole dynamic from when I started in 1980, where you could bring just about anything into the stadium, including a keg of beer, to now where you basically can't bring anything into the stadium. Yeah.
Yeah. So a big part of our kind of whole part of this project is kind of moving to the city after the Colts left.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that day that the Colts left and how the city was?
Yeah. So I went to the last game that the Colts played at Memorial Stadium, and I was working for the Orioles at the time, and the Colts were a franchise going through a rough patch, and at the time, and I do remember in that March day when they left, obviously the Orioles and the Colts kind of competed with each other a little bit at the time. But remember, in 1983, the Orioles won the World Series. 1983, so we were kind of the big game in town. The owner of the Orioles at the time was not well liked in the community, and so the Orioles were the big player in town. The Colts were kind of the afterthought. Although, I distinctly remember as a kid watching watching the Colts win Super Bowl on TV. So this was a football town that had been kind of converted almost to a baseball town because of what was happening on the football field and off the football field with the football team. And so it's difficult for those. I'm from Baltimore, born and bred in Baltimore. Difficult to see your hometown team leave. So it was very challenging, and it was a tough time for many of us in Baltimore. Just because we known the past, and we were hoping to get back to where we were, but that wasn't to be.
Yeah. Do you think them leaving kind of turned the town into fully a baseball town?
I truly do. Again, I was with the Orioles at the time. We won the World Series in '83. The Orioles were very competitive throughout most of that decade, probably till '86, '87, and then they had some difficulty. '89 was a why not year, where in '88 we were terrible. In '89 we almost won the division on the last weekend. So yeah, I think that the worm had turned, and then there was no, I think fans were like, you know what, we got to support the Orioles because we don't want to lose the Orioles. And then the Orioles were purchased. The Hofburgers sold the Orioles to a Washington lawyer, Edward Bennett Williams, and there was real concern that he might move the team to Washington, D.C. And so the fans got behind the Orioles. There was a group of local business people that got a group of people together called the Designated Hitters, and they helped the Orioles sell season tickets, helped them sell group tickets, and I was part of that group at the time. That point in time in my career with the Orioles, I was on the sales side, selling season tickets and in the ticket office. So I kind of managed that group of volunteers. There were a group of about 80 volunteers that helped the Orioles sell season tickets. And our season ticket numbers went from about 1,500 to, but by the time we had left or leaving Memorial Stadium to go to Oriole Park, we almost had 20,000 season ticket holders. So it was a testament to the fans of supporting the local team, but also these volunteers that really beat the bushes and worked for the team to get them where they were. Now, the fans also knew that when Edward Bennett Williams signed a memorandum of agreement, kind of a telling them that yes, I will sign a lease if we build a stadium downtown, and then all of a sudden everything just picked right up and people really supported the team.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Edward Bennett Williams because he's a big part of our project here. Did you have a personal relationship with him at all?
I only talked to him a few times. I was a ticket manager at the time. He would always call a couple weeks before opening day and say, "Are we going to sell opening day out?" And I said, "Yeah, we're going to sell opening day out, and not to worry about that." But I would probably talk to him a few times a year at the most. But yeah, he was just worried about opening day, selling opening day out.
Yeah, and were you personally worried at all about him moving the team to Washington?
I was not. I was not, because I knew that this group of people, these volunteers, these designated hitters, were doing a great job, and our sales numbers continue to rise every year of our season tickets, and it made it very difficult. I think it made the case very difficult for them to move, because remember, at the time Washington did not have a baseball team at the time. They had moved. The Senators had moved to Texas. So they didn't have a team. So that was the concern. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. And did you get to kind of coordinate his kind of his day at the ballpark when he would come to the games? Did you have to do anything like
With EBW?
Yeah.
No, not really. He would come. He never even came into the office. He would just call. But no, I wouldn't. No. Well, on my ticket side, I would do that. But he passed away. I forget what year he passed away. Maybe 88 or.
I think either 88 or 89.
Yeah, and he signed. He was ill, and he signed this memorandum. And I was on the ticket side at the time, and then I moved over, after he passed away. I moved over to the stadium side, so I did not have to coordinate his movements. But our next owner, who ended up being Eli Jacobs, I did coordinate his movements when he came in.
Gotcha. What was that like with him?
Well, he was a New York guy. He was from New York, and he was fine. I never had a problem with Mr. Jacobs, and I would always ask him if whatever he needed. I've tried to help, but remember, we were pretty severely limited at Memorial Stadium as to what we could provide to him, simply because we didn't have all the amenities that we had at Oriole Park. Yeah.
And the other thing people talk about with Edward Bennett Williams is that even though he had these Washington roots, he really did care about the Orioles and their team success. Did you see that at all?
Very much so. Very much so. I saw that. Well, actually, I can't recall what year it was, but he signed 3 really high value free agents. He signed Freddie Lynn. He signed Danny Ford. I forget who the third one was, but he wanted to win. So I don't fault him for that, because he really wanted to win, and I think when winning brings fans to the stadium too. So he was all about that.
Gotcha. That's all I have for questions.
Okay, great.
If there's anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to be included in this, now would be the chance.
No, I think we're good.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.